Good morning. Today I will be discussing which pelvic tilt threshold best discriminates on both the clinical and functional levels. Adult spinal deformity is known to lead to spinal malalignment with anterior shift of the C7 plumb line. To counter this, certain compensation mechanisms take place, of which pelvic retroversion plays a key element. Multiple authors have attempted to establish the proper definition of pelvic retroversion through different pelvic tilt cutoffs. Schwab presented a constant value of 25 degrees through quality of life studies on ASD subjects. Nevertheless, a relationship between pelvic tilt and pelvic incidence has been shown, and multiple authors have published their own formulas. This includes Vial, Loeck, and Resco. Nevertheless, the optimal pelvic tilt cutoff value defining the pelvic retroversion remains to be elucidated. Recently, the importance of functional assessment of ASD patients has been shown. Therefore, the aim of our study was to determine the most relevant pelvic tilt cutoff both clinically and functionally. Our study included 150 subjects with ASD meeting at least one of the ESSG radiographic criteria and a control group of 77 subjects. All subjects underwent EOS biplanar imaging, filled out the Oswestry Disability Index Quality of Life questionnaire, and underwent 3D gait analysis. This analysis allowed the calculation of the gait deviation index, which quantifies deviation of the patient's gait pattern from the normal population. The Schwab ISSG, Vial, Loeck, and Resco pelvic tilt cutoff values were used. Furthermore, a novel method was defined, termed the upper control limit. This upper control limit method was established by calculating a linear regression between the pelvic tilt and the pelvic incidence on the control group. From this model, the upper limit, as defined by the mean plus 2 standard deviation trendline, was used. This provided the equation of pelvic tilt equals 0.33 multiplied by pelvic incidence plus 6. From these different thresholds, two groups were derived for each method. Patients with normal version, termed norm PT, and patients with retroversion, termed high PT. In order to assess patient distributions between these two groups, a chi-square test was computed. The agreement between the different classification methods was then evaluated using Fleiss kappa, then followed by a pairwise Cohen's kappa. And finally, the impact of pelvic tilt threshold methods on quality of life and gait kinematics was compared. The distribution of the classification of subjects as either norm PT or high PT using different methods can be seen on these graphs, with the trend lines indicating the cutoff values. The chi-square test shows a significant difference between these different distributions. And in fact, while the general Fleiss kappa showed fair agreement, we can see a trend in these distributions, with Schwab ISSG and UCL being different than the Vial, Loeck, and Resco methods. The pairwise analysis showed high agreement between the Schwab ISSG and UCL methods on the one hand, and the Vial, Loeck, and Resco methods on the other. However, the agreement between the two larger groups was quite low. Furthermore, comparisons showed that only the Schwab ISSG and UCL methods showed significant differences between the norm PT and high PT groups in terms of gait deviation index and Oswestry Disability Index. In conclusion, similar distributions of patients were found between the norm PT and high PT in the Schwab ISSG and the UCL methods, while the other methods classified patients more as high PT. Similarly, there was high agreement in distributions between these same groupings of methods, but not in between them. Functional and quality of life data showed significant differences between pelvic tilt groups only in the Schwab ISSG and UCL methods. Schwab ISSG and UCL were therefore found to better discriminate between ASD patients on functional and quality of life levels. As such, we recommend the use of population-specific thresholds based on upper control limit if available, or else use the cutoff of 25 degrees. Thank you very much.